morning, I'm going to ask our Deputy Mayor, Councillor Wharehinga, to open with Karakia for us.
Morena tātou, a mino e tātou. Ihoa, tēnei mātou e tūhu nei, tā tātou hui, tika ki te punu, e roto i tō e moa tapu, ake kāmiri.
Amen. Thank you for that. Warmest of welcome to our Civil Defence meeting. We have the lovely John Price, who's the Deputy CEO of NEMA, here with us today. Thank you, John, for not being a stranger to our place. Last time, poor John and myself and the Minister hoofed the back of Wainui School emergency, and the Minister did not wear his sneakers like I said he should. There were a few times when I had to hold his hand to pull him up, but John, that was a very good day, made everyone aware of what is expected of schools, also to look after the kids. And then it is a great honour to introduce Nomai Waikwood, who is our recovery manager. Welcome, Nomai. It is fantastic to have you on board and to bring all our stuff together and to work closely with Ben and Nadine and Nima and Ian to keep us safe and coordinate our recovery going forward. So it's lovely to have you here as well. As always, welcome to my mate Ian. Thank you, Ian. Always lovely to see you. Committee members, I do have an apology. Whoever's phone or computer is making any noise, it would be best if you turn that down. Who is on our committee? So Councillor Rawinia Parata, welcome online. Lovely to have you there. Everyone else is here. Thank you for that. So let's move on to our declarations of interest. Any declarations? Nothing? Then I'm going to take you to page 3, which have our minutes from last time, and Dee would have sent it out. Thank you, Councillor Wharehinga. Seconded by Councillor Gregory. All in favour? Aye. 1, 3, carried. I just want to see why am I not an apology? I usually chair. Where was I? I was definitely an apology in the absence of Her Worship the Mayor. Was it a flight? Oh, apology for lateness. There we go, I see it now. But I think I was very, very late. I think the flight never arrived. Anywho, let us move on and take a look at our action register, which is on page 8 of 31. Dr. Murray, do you have anything to add to the volcanic hazards of mud volcanoes? I see that's still in progress. Are you happy with the progress taking place?
Yes, it's been going through the comms system. I have a draft with me here, but as you can see.
Oh, there we go.
I'm a wee bit uncomfortable about having a photograph of myself on the
Go for it, Murray.
Cover of this, but overall they're looking good. It's been through a bit of editorial with our comms team and just a wee bit of debate about whether or not we have a more detailed map of where all these things are. It's got a back cover which is essentially blank. On that. Once that's done, then it'll actually be live, and the actual full detailed report will also be up on the website, which has all of the detail, and that's about 60 embarrassingly long pages. So that's all ready to go.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And then being our other action item is the big group.
Yes, I can.
You want to update us on progress?
Got Vet Kinsella online. There is obviously a reference in a report to the group plan, but if the vet perhaps give an update relevant to that action.
Good morning, Yvette. Thank you for joining us online. Lovely to see you. We're just on page 8 of our agenda talking about the progress of our group plan.
Kia ora, ngā mihi kia koutou. Thank you. We're making some good progress on the group plan actually. The next step is risk assessment. It's quite an entailed process that requires a bit of coordination of a lot of people and a lot of data and information. So we're looking at having some risk assessment workshops in June. So we'll be reaching out to people. We're trying to take a slightly, possibly a different approach to some other regions who have done this, and really looking to try and reach out into the community and get out into some of our places, given the nature, the geographic nature and the social context of our region. So we were wanting to make sure some of those workshops were held out in the, for instance, Ruatoria, Te Karakia, some of those places. So yeah, it's quite a logistical coordination thing, but we're going to smash it out. And yeah, and then that is the foundation really for a lot of the setting some of the priorities in the group plan. So once we know what we're faced with, then we can actually make sure that we're covering all of our gaps. We have excellent stuff in place now. It's that really looking towards the future. So have we got the right structures in place to deal with those risks, and the right people? And yeah, so I'm excited about doing that, and it'll be a great opportunity, I think, for some of the CDEM group members to be engaged in that process too.
Can you remind me of the timeline of this?
So when you say the timeline, you mean when are you going to see an actual group plan?
How much work is still left in order for us to sign it off? And is it a year-long process? Is it 6 months?
No,
what's the type of
no. My goal is to get this done by July, the risk assessment part, and the drafting has started on the group plan. The risk assessment, so the front end of the group plan and some of the descriptions of our structures and our place and our arrangements are done. It's just the risk assessment that we need to just make sure that we don't have any gaps, and that's where the risk assessment is really critical. So I would hope that we would then by the next CDEM group, you'll have a draft in front of you that you'll be able to have a look at, and then there will be a engagement process with the community.
Thank you. Ian?
Just one thing, Yvette and Ben. We've had a number of group plans at the moment that have actually had a few gaps. What I'm going to suggest is perhaps we have a quick meeting via Zoom on section 49, just to outline exactly what we are looking for in the plan so you're aware. And you can actually, I guess, tailor the plan for that as well.
Mm.
Any more questions? This was just our update on or progress on our action items. I'm going to take everyone to page 10, our first report for the day, which is about our Tairāwhiti Regional Response Team Funding Model. And then I'm going to hand over to you to introduce the paper to us, and then we'll open the floor for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Worship. Just by way of background, obviously within the summary of this context, the KEG, really in terms of the initial proposal recommending the formation of a regional response team, and subsequent that was raised for Walker at the end of last year, and obviously that was conditional to the finance of the funding model being really brought forward, and that's the purpose of the table today. I've had Pauline and the finance team have worked through that, and Pauline will talk to obviously the finance components, the key one. We'll talk to the pertinent aspects that relate to how we look to fund the team. I have, just by way, before I hand over to Pauline, Worship Chair, I've got with John Price, and I think it's probably a good segue in terms of how, even this year, with the recent events, including Canterbury last week, what we're looking to embed. John's certainly well placed in terms of the oversight for national response teams and their role within the city groups. And when we take it through today, really we'll be looking to replicate it and have that capability embedded into our region here. So I'll hand over to you.
So, okay, Chair. Yeah, look, just what is the support being in this initiative? The NZRTs are they're a real asset to you within the community, because they're the community members, that they are volunteers, obviously, and we have 16 of these already set up across New Zealand, and they are just that. They are deployable in your regions. They are your people. And for example, across the country, there are 424 people that volunteer. So think of it a bit like FENS, where FENS have their volunteer firefighters. It's the same sort of model, but these are to deal with emergency management. Highly trained. There's a strong discipline within their certification for their training and their skills. They are professional. They turn out and will be a huge support to Ben and the team going forward. So in the last, for every event, most times they will deploy in some way, shape or form. So you would have seen that down in Canterbury. They were used to evacuate a lot of the Selwyn huts, the area that was under stress with flooding, and they would go in and do that. So they tend to be well equipped, well trained, well disciplined, and a professional entity. It's a big deal. 424 people every week, commit to their training cycles. What we do to support this is we have a very strong certification model in behind it, so that they are certified to a certain standard, which means that it keeps you safe as a council as well, because they're meeting those criteria around health and safety and such like. So the certification and the training enables them to be skilled and able to be deployed. So training and exercises last year, that 16, we were involved in 1,089 training and exercises. They attended 128 community events. So they're on the positive side and engaging with communities. They do a lot of that. So if there are events, they'll turn up. They tend to be wearing the uniforms. They tend to have uniform vehicles and all sort of things. So they create that trust and confidence and visibility in the emergency response requirements. So to give you an idea, last year alone there were 24 deployments. 8 of those were for fire support, another 5 for flood support, involved in 5 rope rescues, swift water rescues, oil spills, and also involved in search and rescue. So they can be utilised across, and they surge as well. So the ability to surge in to support other NZRT teams across the country, it just becomes for the greater good as well. So huge endorsement from us. We have a permanent person who is there to ensure the training and certification occurs in a timely fashion, and gives you that, and Ben and the team, the ability to know that they have reached a certain standard. We don't certify unless they get to that standard, and then they recertify as well.
Anything else you want to add, Ben, before we open to the floor?
Probably an inevitable question. I'll go right back to where I first mooted the concept with the teams. Is that really, I guess what was sought then was a proliferation of the teams throughout the whole district. The reality is that starting small, and go back 4 years, this was the emergency centre here. So it's an aspect of really embedding consolidation, and then we look to review as part of the phase 2 in terms of what we do. At present, I rely on the fact that the response teams from either Bay of Plenty or within the national framework eminently those groups of people we can request to deploy into region. What we're looking to obviously have here, we haven't been on the tools for some time, touch wood, but we know that really we're getting ready for our next event, and having that capability here with whānau we can activate and we'll train them to that extent is going to be certainly a major step change for capability in the district. So financial austerity does apply. It's not about trying to really ask for everything and really go from there. It's around we start small, take the proof of concept, embed it, and then we really, in terms of this group, at a future point we'll then look to really review, and on a scale there's obviously a cost that we're going to need to embed into that as well. So, but thank you for your support to this point, and equally I'll hand over to Pauline, given that the dollars and cents obviously do matter. So managed, I think, to at least bring that figure down from where we were.
Thank you, Pauline.
Hopefully it's set out within the paper of what it is and where the costs are and what's the administration of it, and allows it to be in a phased approach where, as Ben said, that embed it first, find it work, and then you can go to a phase 2 or 3 is where it needs to occur. Most of the cost, as is mentioned in here, is the safety cost for the individual people concerns, and so you have to, that can lend itself to grants and donation kind of aspects with it, for depending on what it is. But basically, we've costed it what it is it costs and what do you need to go for ongoing annual costs associated with it, and then there's the vehicle costs, etc. Most of the other overheads resides within councils, and there's the minimal costs associated with it. So this tells you what those costs are. It also is saying in the first couple of years where there is enough of the existing budgets will cover it, and then there is that gradual scope that there will be an increase, minimal increase to the overall rates. Given that we are also, just to be mindful of, that we are saying that we have our rates components, especially for this 3 years, was a BAU rates, and then we had our recovery rates. This probably definitely fits within the recovery rates, saying what do we need to scale up, what do we need to do, what do we need to be ready for, and that's the separation, and these are the additional things in here. It allows you a vehicle to go forward, which says use the vehicle that you already have for a disaster relief trust, that if you are wanting to collect, not for just for donations for going back to the individuals, that doesn't change the underlying function of the disaster relief trust and how those grants are administered, that won't change. But if you allow a vehicle to collect donations for the volunteer service, for the operations of the response, the disaster relief trust would separate that, and then that can be administered. So we're just saying, if there's a vehicle, let's set it up that allows that for the future opportunities that may arise associated with it. Happy to take any questions with regards to kind of the financial aspects, if you like.
Hey, the floor is open. Councillor Telfer.
Yeah, I'm just still a little bit unsure about this whole concept. I'm just wondering, are we looking at this taking over our current civil defence model, where we have people out in the different areas that are supposed to be working within those areas? Because we're looking at having this team here in town, but one of the problems we faced, as we know, was these areas are cut off, and having people in those areas. I'm just wondering whether, can this effort not be put into actually training people that are currently in those areas and upskilling them more, and then adding to their team so that they're actually on site when these things happen, because mobilising people to different areas, as it showed during the cyclone for our area, is not an easy thing to do.
It's an and. But Ben, I'll leave it to you to give an understanding of how it fits into our current model.
So we're in a readiness phase now. Readiness is we're preparing for our next event. So the team tempo changes from obviously response or what constitutes support for recovery. In that sense, readiness for us is really where it's the community engagement with a very much a configured focus on equipment, which we've invested millions of dollars with equipment, not ratepayer funded, I might add in that regard also. But equally for those community groups to be able to activate that, and that's what is probably makes our model. We deliberately enable our communities to respond. Councillor Pahuru dealing with the incoming flood event 2 weeks ago, looking at the aspects of really what they were doing was deploying sandbags and supporting them for that. And NZOT isn't just a group of people that's going to going to be sitting out in the community. They are what we don't have, which is the ability to, when we need to supplement or deploy a group of trained people that can work in an environment that's austere, that actually presents risk, that they're trained to a level to be able to do that. At the moment, you won't find any community group that would have the skills or competencies, particularly the Health and Safety at Work Act, to be able to work in the environments where we're deliberately deploying as a CDEM group. And in that sense, we deal with the weather, severe weather, as a most likely and most frequent event. Now, the only good thing about a severe weather event is that we know it's coming. We set our chessboard more than 3 days out, and we would then look to deploy that group when we get it to support or deal with where that immediate response would be required. If there's more required from that, particularly if you have a Gabrielle scenario where every one of your 42 committees is going to be in some degree of strife, you're not going to deal with the end state of that. But what we're looking for, particularly in terms of why we actually stand up and deal with response, is where your most critical and most vital application of the resources you have will provide the best impact and support of what happens. So I don't think it's a case of looking at it, we're going to try and just push people out in the region where communities can do that, because I know that they can't. Purely the complexity of the event will be where you've got the ability to supplement. And even then, they won't fully mitigate the aspect of what you're trying to reduce in terms of risk. So I see that as a controller. And anyway, it's a controller seat relevant to your particularly PCB obligations in terms of deploying people, put them in harm's way without their training, without their competency. Then you're actually accepting risk, and that risk actually sits with the individual that's actually discharging that. So there's benefits at a number of levels, but working really in the sector and what John just related to with what happened in Selwyn last week, there's a degree of confidence, at least the people you've got doing the initial surge for that, that they are the right people to be sitting in that situation.
So how I understand it, we still have what's currently our groups that are really in the regions, our hapu groups and people that Ben have clear communications with, Dean have clear connections. When something happens, they are in that community, but we have this specialist group of people who are trained that then can, like you did with Kumi before the cyclone, when you dropped him into Ruatoria to be the working alongside the Rawinia and the crew there, one specialist person that could then help there. So how I understand this is that yes, the communities are still there and they know who to contact, what nanny need to be evacuated, who needs food, but then if it really gets bad, this group of people have the specialist attributes to then go and support them through it.
Yeah.
Is it a correct understanding?
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
that's
And
what I
we
thought.
always have, like, if I refer you back to the initial report in September 2024, the recommendation to establish the NZRT was approved, subject to the financial information. So it's not the rationale that we should be debating because that has already happened and approved. It's around whether financially it makes sense for council to fund it.
Councillor Gregory.
I've also got concerns with it. To me, it seems like another layer, and my biggest concern, since we're talking about finances, is the fact that it's going to add 2% onto our ratepayers for something that I don't know, I can't see why we need this extra layer. And, you know, in times of crisis, we have people stepping up. We've got forestry people, you know, they're all trained too. They're all, every business like Pioneer down in the subdivision, they do training all the time. They do first aid, they do all sorts, you know. So I just wonder the point of this. And at this stage, I don't feel like I can support it in terms of that 2% rate rise.
It's less than 0.2.
1.7.
No,
This is the
0.17. It is less than 0.2%, so it is a minimal increase in terms of overall rates. It's a minimal impact. And
How much
it
is
would be
that?
it's within the, at the moment it's 90k within those kind of the parts that you're doing, and there's over the phases. So it's a minimal impact in terms of it, and it would be within your thresholds that you said this is the maximum amount that we would be doing with the overall rates, and you had within the thresholds for recovery was 3.5%. By the time we had by year 3, we were at about, we're only at 1%, less than 1% of their recovery. So within that threshold, you have got the ability to do it. It's a minimal increase in terms of the impacts overall to the rates.
Councillor Parata.
Morena tātou. I remember us having the debate, and I remember the support for it. I think it makes sense to have more people that are trained in specialized fields based here in the region. And I'm hoping actually that those skills are transferable, and the more we get to be around those people, the more of those kinds of skills exist along the East Coast, knowing that we have so many weather events. Just question why we're suggesting that one should be based out Patutahi and not in Te Karakia.
Thank you for that. Ben, can you talk about the base locations that the team decided would be most suitable?
The initial planning was around fens. I would take it really, there's an outline guide, but I would probably look to the area of responsibility, Councillor Parata, would be the Gisborne floodplain. So where that team sits and resides in there, I think in terms of phase 2 consideration, and in that reference I'm talking to the static location for that team, would be by way of really how we engage those communities and mutually determine then the best location for them. So it's really phase 2 I haven't delved into. Really it's for me, as much as Nadine's indicated, the initial concept which was discussed last year. Phase 2 for me really is we've got to embed, well, first thing we've got to do is actually confirm that we're going to want to proceed with this in terms of funding, and then we look at phase 2 as a escalation then in terms of, because that's obviously going to incur costs for that as well. So we're entrenched with the view that that team in terms of 2 deployable teams within that context would support either the east or west, or they could variably be deployed or to the east or to the west then. But I have yet to really engage with a detailed phase 2 because it's probably more horizon scanning for me, not really the immediate focus for what they're after today.
I could only hear every second or third word of that, but what I heard was that those details will be confirmed later after community engagement. Is that true? Yeah, kapai, cool. Oh yeah, all good. So long as the communities have fair chance to consider where it potentially can or should be based on the overall needs of the region. The other thing I just wanted to get an understanding of is when we did the recovery plan, or was it the 3-year plan, long-term plan? When we talked about rates increases, we were able to figure out how many dollars actually it was per person to understand what the kinds of increase would be. Do we know exactly how many dollars per person that the increase would cost?
$4
A year.
$4 a year.
Sorry, yeah. So you're talking, when we said the recovery rate of a percentage was about $80 when we said that we were doing in the first one, and that was a 3.5. So the amounts, because you've also got the other recovery, but this extent is minimal. That would add to the uniform managerial charge for this application under those thresholds.
you.
Sorry, I also didn't understand that answer. So what does that mean? Like,
It's less than $10.
Per year, per person.
Yes, per annum.
Less than $10 per person per annum.
Per property.
per annum. Oh, okay then. Yeah, all good. Thank you. Those are my questions.
So thank you for this paper being how I look at it. If you take a look at the last, since 2017, at the business of civil defence, what we have done, how we have aged doing civil defence, and what a huge part it is of what we do. We have a team, and John and the Minister can attest that our team works efficiently, they are well prepared, they are award-winning for what they do. So when that team, who doesn't ask a lot of us either, come and say, I think if we add this to our kete, if we supplement and complement what we currently have, it can be even better. To me, that is a proactive way forward where we, like Rawinia said, you know, we do hope those skills are transferable. We upskill people in our community who then become confident leaders in those areas, and that is what we need. So for me, I am a big supporter of this. I will be watching with interest how you talk to communities, how it rolls out, how you also learn from the regions who already have this working, the 16 regions who've pulled this into place, and see how it complement what we have. And like Councillor Telfer, the question he had, where it's not a replacement, it is an and. So I am very happy to move the recommendations on page 12, but I'm just going to ask if there are any more questions or a seconder.
A second.
Seconded by Councillor Wharehinga. Question, Councillor Pahuruhuriwai.
Just a question that it may have been in there somewhere around the membership of the entity. How is that determined?
With the Chair, the recruitment really will be taking the proposition of what it is. So it's, to be honest, I could fill that team today, just with really, I mean, I'm talking whānau across regions that are looking for something that's a bit more than actually being within the community response space. And they're the sort of people we want. It's really, you've got to be motivated, the ability to actually understand what the role requires of you. And these are volunteer roles that, and once again, our tautoko are volunteers that they're putting their time and their mahi into the space that we ask them. And in this case, we'll be asking them to do a lot more with some degree of risk, which is why the training component that we spoke to is about really having the aptitude and the ability to do it. So look, I do this for a day job, and I talk to Nia that we don't ask for a lot. In fact, I'll squeeze everything I can out of the sponge that is the sector. But if I can refer to being a capability as a national controller as well. I know the importance of what this team will do for this region. And the day I finish in here, it's really around that we're so far ahead of where we are today. But I know that this will be the ability to get our communities, particularly connected to this kaupapa, more intimately in the specialist space.
Yeah.
Without wishing to drag it on, what the Act says your role with governance is to assure that you can respond and meet your capabilities and give assurance to your communities that you can respond and actually do the job. This team will give you that surety. It'll also give you the confidence in the skills that they've got and the ability to prioritise the issues you want. It will go to meeting your governance and assurance role under the Act.
Awesome. Thank you. If there are no more questions, I have moved the paper, seconded by Councillor Wharehinga. All in favour? Aye. Contrary? Aye. Carried. Okay, let's move to page... Next paper is, I'm going to hand over to you again, which is your paper talking about everything civil defence in the region and just updating us on what's happening and what is not happening.
Your Worship, I'll take the report as read. I guess in summary, much as the previous discussion has alluded to, we're fortunate to be in the time of readiness and in the phase of readiness. So that's a good thing really in terms of all the great mahi that's going on, and I also acknowledge, we get to meet my new colleague, Nomai, who's joined us, but really what that allows for is really the integration, particularly within the recovery and risk reduction space, and really how we'll be overlapping the synergies for both of us in terms of that community-facing work. Just move to the paper. Yvette Kinsella, just looking at point 4 on page 24. The group plan is obviously a key document for us, and particularly for what sets our direction within the context of how we're going to discharge the emergency management function for our region. And a number of groups are going through really the revision of their group plans at present. Equally, we have running in parallel with that is the emergency system improvements, which the Minister embarked on last year following the North Island Severe Weather Events report and recommendations, and the emergency management bill, which is obviously going through consultation now. So the group plan, which we can talk to, is there any requirement to expand beyond really the update within that she's given previous and with what's in the report there? Everyone's happy with that? Yeah. Page 25, an example of really, I guess, regional resilience and hardening our regional resilience. And if you cast your mind back, if it doesn't matter what community you were in, but particularly for the city, which is a community of 38,000, dealing with the water emergency and the fact that for many of those periods that we had for the 45 days we were out of water, can only provide context of what it takes to deal with the region that's cut off, and dealing with what would be a critical outage for commodities such as water, and really what became blatant or very clear within the national ability to respond to that. So, once again, the work really that goes on in terms of what we've been able to roll out in the 2 units you see there within that page provide an indication of the capability as a region we have now. What I have really, and it's further in the report around the ability to secure additional lottery grant funding, is to be able to fund 2 of the large units there. So if you put the investment level into what we have to be able to support a regional and equally a city or urban response, particularly with the water emergency, you can see the context there, 27 pallets of water within a 24-hour period. Now, military, particularly the tendency is you look at the fly bulk commodities in, and when you're putting a tag for the taxpayer at $8,000 an hour plus the return and the expense of really trying to maintain that is obviously quite a challenge. For us, really, we have the 2nd unit that's on order now via the by the lotteries grant, and one of these 2 units, and this is an example where we'll be able to declare this as a deployable asset within the national system. And I've emailed John and Dave Corn last week, is that would be looking to make available when we have the 2nd unit commissioned to be able to support a national or a regional event. And there's been a number of councils and iwi groups that have come through and equally are purchasing, particularly the smaller unit for their what they've learnt and what we've engaged with from here for their own purposes. So we have actually the whole water project that's been nominated with Tairāwhiti for the 2025 awards in June next month. This is part of the collaboration project. So to be honest, it's not about the awards anymore. It's just that we've been through, if you've never been a region or an entity that's lived through what we went through with the water emergency, you will never understand the full context of why we've pursued these systems. And the ability, particularly to provide water, is one of the most critical commodities in the space there. And Ngāti Porou in particular, in partnered with this as a resource fund, have purchased 15 of those units. So when we talk to training and readiness, my remit, particularly supporting George and the Runanga, and I'm catching up with Whiti Timutumu at 1 o'clock for that, is around that joint integrated aspect of training. And I want to own the training with the units that the hapu have in terms of deployment. That's what our commitment is to community training. and readiness, and equally with that also the structures to help them respond for us. The lottery grants have been through, sorry.
That's a question. How are those powered?
They represent probably the latest technology, and this is, it doesn't exist anywhere else, but they designed the small ends we can run fully on DC, right? So that's solar, battery bank, and hybrid with a generator. The large unit, which is not very energy hungry either, we're looking for the next iteration of that to be would run continuously with the solar field.
Also, just about this, I would hate people to sit at home and think, oh, it's okay, the council are going to save us. They've got the little things, because they're not. And every individual needs to be disaster ready in their own home and not think that it's okay, the council's got our back, because they might not. Yeah.
So it complements really, which is constant messaging for us, and you know the PO project which is on page 27 as an example, really where disaster or catastrophic risk readiness and resilience really starts with the individual household, and that requirement in terms of the basics, you've got to be able to look after yourself for the first 72 hours as a minimum. So the systems are designed when you're dealing with mass outage, particularly where you've got your built-up areas. And you know, we work on a amount of 2 litres per person per day in terms of drinking water. Now, part of commissioning, and Council Alder came down to see the system when we had it running 2 weeks ago. We took the river water sample out of the Tairāwhiti. So we did a post or pre-treatment sample to measure the start state, and what we're doing is validating the treatment post-treatment. It should be no surprise, or you may not be aware, but the level of risk within the river for the pre-treatment sample, so I'm talking E. coli and the bugs that are in there, was actually probably surprised me, it shocked me. But particularly what we're after was the fact we had a 0 result for anything that went through the full filtration process. And I know Tim Berry with Lifelines and the Waters team, you know, Tim's dealt with these sort of units in another life there as well. The role is not to replace, it's not to replace the full water system, but for that time where that water system needs to be repaired, and what we don't have as an option at the moment is a backup to be able to allow that. So it is certainly a capability. It's relatively cheap in terms of what's being funded, and that's taxpayer funding, and I guess our linking back to the taxpayers, that one of the units that have been funded by them will be for John to consider within the national logistics surge for that.
That's right. So these things are somewhere sitting there in a box. Do you have a program where you do maintenance or make sure they're working or that sort of carry on before the next emergency, which could be anywhere between?
So, through the chair, what we're actually introducing, and I'll just go back to page 25. So you see the 21 small units there. We have a training unit that my team, led by Marcus Tibble primarily, we use that unit, so we're not operationally turning on what are the units we've got embedded out in the community. So really the purpose of, even with Ngāti Provan really leant in to purchase their units, and my commitment was always back to George Reedy, was that we wanted to own the training and want to own the training specifically, and using the train-to-trainer model keeps our community groups as the activators of the system. It allows us to turn them on. We do that annually. We do the system check. We've got the consumables, and they are quite readily available. The large unit, and this is part of the significance of what you've just approved with the previous motion, will be a new capability that doesn't exist within the New Zealand response teams, is that team will be the activator for this unit, which means that as a response team for Tairāwhiti, they have the ability to deploy disaster-ready emergency management filtration systems, up to including an out-of-region request for more support. I think that's a significant capability that doesn't exist within the national system. Being an ex-Defence Force, I can tell you now, this equipment doesn't exist within the Defence Force as well.
Thank you.
Final one, the Lotteries Community Grant, any questions around it? The PO project for the schools, I will highlight we initiated this back in 2021 as a pilot. Really take into account the 22, 23, aspects of 24, really managed to now bring this forward and take it beyond a pilot to look at it as embedding it as a critical aspect of engagement with all our kura. Top to bottom within the hazard zones and planning for this, and I'm fortunate enough we've got the original project planner who was with the science organisation who led this coming to the region on the 21st and 22nd, or 20th and 21st of May. I'll extend the invites to you all if you want to come along. There'll be a community session for that. I'm also looking for all our school principals, Ministry of Education, that we're going to run as a very focused session for early childhood centres, in fact, anyone that really constitutes a training organisation for children, to connect the PRO project to them, and over the course of the next 12 months, look to roll that out, working with our community groups and as well.
Councillor Pahuruhuriwai.
So about a map, will there be like a map ready at some point of where the PO are? So if you've got visiting tamariki and Ruhi and something like that, everybody knows where those are?
It's a good question, and through the chair, the answer is yes. We're looking, one thing which is underway is the build of a dedicated website for us. Now that really, the intention of the website is to turn it into an interactive resource rather than just a dumb information portal. I'm not saying that's what we're in at the moment. There's so much in terms of what's relatable for particularly the likes of kura in terms of really understanding the Tairāwhiti aspect of hazards and having the ability to leverage what is in the science space, some of which is council, some of which is from the external science agencies, creating an environment where they can access that and using that as the go-to then to then connect the co-operative firms.
That picture is evidence we moved it right up. That picture does not tell you the slope.
No, no.
We had to sit down as well before. But the kids loved it, and it is beautiful. That PO is beautiful. And those kids then, if there's a real thing, they will walk over the ridge and go to Waikirikiri. So Wainui would go up that ridge to their PO. If it's absolute disaster on the coast side, they would not go down again. They will then travel on the ridge through to Waikirikiri school. So there's also some integration there. Yeah, very good.
Through the chair, the initial, what we'd like to do for our 2025 campaign this year is that for the areas that we will focus to get these PO into place, and it's going to take a bit of time for delivery, but to really have these to be part of what they exercise on their break for shakeout. That's really where we want to align the whole project to be that point in time where they physically get to do their haircut, and then we'll relate to the hazard preparation stuff in terms of really continuing on the work we have achieved for the last 4 years, and that's, I think as a community, 27% sign up last year. It's the sort of figure you really want for local elections.
Yeah. Councillor Alder.
Thank you, Your Worship. So Ben, throughout the region we now have containers that contain civil defence equipment and resources, and based around those are teams, and I suppose you call that a hub. Can you tell us at what stage of readiness are those hubs, and what is the timescale? What sort of timescale are we looking at for achieving full state readiness?
Yeah, it's a good question. We have, and I guess, the fact we've been able to resource communities, so this probably even touches on what Councillor Telfer mentioned, is that if we go back 4 or 5 years ago, we'd be very well focused on talking to the community about the hazard, what's going to hurt you, what's going to be the impact of the hazards. The focus in terms of delivery up until this point has been taking the ability to talk to that but take it beyond the fact that we know that you're going to be cut off. As an example, if you say whangara, it's the ability to then look at your resourcing, the capability for that community to be able to respond. So in the reference to that is really around its direct enablement for people to do what they need to do as a community by themselves, because that's the stark reality for a lot of our region. The training component, which for 42 plus communities is really what forms our whole engagement program for the work stream that engages with community readiness. And that's, we're running weekly those sort of sessions. So being at the Beef and Lamb Conference in Ruatoria last week with Marcus and Dallas, Marapa as communities, Manituke, it's as a minimum, an annual training engagement for us to be with every community. We focus on the equipment. This is around, following on from the questions around how do we activate the kit. We do that by the fact that we train them as an annual training activity. We bring it out, pull it out, encourage them to use it. And the second component really is a group, as an entity, how you activate to be able to stand up and be functional as a community group to be able to connect into the ecosystem that is the emergency framework. Some of these groups are very well practiced because they do it a lot. If you're living in Uawa, up in the Ruatoria, up in the, right up to the top of the coast. These are groups that are not trying to work out how to do it, they actually are practice at it. Our bit is trying to make them spin faster and efficiently in the way that we can actually do it. So certainly that's a KPI for us in that regard.
So can you be a bit more specific? If there are 42, how many are ready now? And at what time, what date is the target to have them all ready?
To a degree, Councillor, they're ready now. It's, if I look in terms of how could they be ready better, it's around what we're currently rolling out. So resilient communications as an example. Some of the areas where we're rolling out the communications resilience project seeks to deal with what has always been a problem. There's actually a problem without an emergency, which is the inability to connect all of our communities in the region. So for that process, really, I would probably give a time frame by the end of the year in terms of being able to help that technology out.
Any more questions of Ben's report? As you can see, lots happening in lots of different spaces. Ian, do you want to talk to us about the NEMA update? Oh, John, that is yours, page 30 of 31. Thank you again for joining us. The floor is yours.
My pleasure. Look, thanks very much, and it's an honour and privilege to be here. I know the report's been tabled, but I just thought I'd outline a couple of things and just tease them out a little bit with you. So, obviously, NEMA nationally and the whole emergency management system is going through a bit of a refresh and a bit of a reset at the moment, and this is a good thing. So it's also a massive opportunity, I think, for the whole system, of which you are a critical part to play in that. So the big ones for us are the two major change programs. So there's, and as Ben's alluded to, there's the emergency management strategic investment program. So that's simply the change program. Then there's the legislation, which is obviously the big thing for us at the moment. The legislation as it is, current legislation is 2002. There's been a lot happen, as decades have gone by. There's been, a lot of events that have occurred, and the realisation from the Minister is that current legislation isn't fit for purpose. You probably recall with the previous government, they started to go down that track. It was stopped, paused, stopped, and now there's the reset. So as that legislation and the review looks at how we can do things better, we're looking for those submissions and talking to your Chief Executive before these things are being pulled together. These submissions are going to be very important to hear from you. So there are a couple of events that are occurring, and the Minister's agreed to push out that submission period to 5 p.m. on the 13th of May. And tomorrow the Joint Committee Chairs are all being invited to a Teams event to hear where things are and what the themes currently are looking like that have come in through already. We're receiving a lot of submissions. The previous bill, of note, 80% of submissions were actually around animals, which was interesting because, you know, both animal action groups as well as farmers and such like. So, you know, if you think about that, we need to probably make sure animals are important, and I get that, but humans are very, very important. So we need to make sure that probably there's a stronger sense of what you need. You as a cohort, I think, can add so much value because you have been through so much repeatedly that you know, and also look at the last couple of weeks, all three major metropolitan cities have also had a bit of a shake-up as well. If you think about ex-cyclone coming through, hitting the Auckland region, Northland, and then last week we obviously had Canterbury, predominantly Christchurch, Selwyn, been affected, and then Wellington as well. So it's front and centre of a lot of people at the moment. So I just really reinforce that. Look, the Minister's really keen to hear your views, and don't underestimate, you have a soft spot in his heart, and he often leans into what you as a region have to say. So don't underestimate your thinking in that space. So please put that feedback through. The submissions go through our website, you know that, or just email directly emergency management bill at nema.govt.nz. So I can't overemphasise that our Minister is superb. He's hugely committed to making a difference in this space. I know that we are constrained financially as a country currently, but a lot of this work program and things is looking out 5-10 year periods. So the economy, as it gets better, will make sure the investment starts to occur. The MSIP program, for example, went through the ECO. It took less than 2 minutes for the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister and our Minister to push it through that system. So it's by most other parties are not using this as a political lever. It's being used simply as the best thing for us to do to keep our communities safe from emergencies. So the proposed objectives of the new bill are focusing on 5 main key things: strengthening community and iwi Māori participation in emergency management. The other one is to provide for clear responsibilities and accountabilities at national, regional and local levels. One of the things that NEMA we've done, we've appointed a DCE for assurance, because it's one of those things we realise that assurance is critical to make sure that there is accountability in the system, and that is going to be a strong theme coming through the bill as well. Enabling a higher minimum standard for emergency management. The whole professionalisation and conversation you had earlier was all about professionalising the capability. You know, it's a very interesting, you've got, if you look at first responders, for example, emergency services, they already have a very strong professional body. Emergency management doesn't have anything like that. There's a lot of work to be done to professionalise. We don't have a standardised training framework, we don't have a standardised career progression framework, we don't have a standardised body of knowledge, we don't have a school, if you like, of emergency management. Most other places do have that, so there's a lot of work to be done to professionalise what we do. It's one of those things is making sure there's certification on things. You're asking your people as local or group controllers and recovery managers to, you know, take into their hands the lives of your community, yet we don't actually certify them per se. All it says in the current Act is suitably qualified and experienced. In fact, for local controllers, it doesn't even say that. It's only for group controllers. So there's a lot of work for us to do to professionalise the system, and that's a big focus. Minimise disruption to essential services. It's making sure there's accountability in there for the likes of your power, your telecommunications, your water, all those key lifelines or infrastructure needs to be toughened up. We have a very vulnerable landscape in New Zealand. You know that. The landslides that you have in your region alone is huge, but that means that it puts at risk a lot of our key infrastructure capability, our roading systems, our telecommunications, our power, our rail, all of those sort of things need to be probably more accountability and minimum services required. ensuring the agencies have the right powers available when an emergency happens. So the Minister's even just teasing out a little bit around, do we need to, at the moment, to have a local state of emergency? You've got to meet a certain threshold. It means that you can't activate powers before that. Is there a need to actually bring that threshold down a little bit so you can access those powers earlier? So a lot of thinking in that space. Some of the themes that are coming through from other places are ensuring there's increase in resource and funding. Funding's always going to be there. The equality of emergency management. You know, we cannot afford in New Zealand to have a postcode emergency management system. At the moment we do. Depending on, you know, what money, how wealthy various regions are, will depend on potentially the different service that they will receive. That's not fair for community members. If you need response, you need response. Ensuring the 4 Rs are covered off. You know, response, but we forget that recovery starts when response starts. But making sure the legislation clearly covers off recovery, risk reduction and readiness. We tend to focus on response, and you know, I look after emergency management response for our national organisation, so it's front of mind for us. It's what we get measured on, but the impact happens in the recovery space. So making sure those four Rs are strengthened throughout. Standards and consistency in training has been a real theme from other areas that have come through. And resilience for the variety of divergent hazards and risks. So what's happening is, you know, the legislation as it currently sits was basically done for emergencies, not so much for a crisis, the pandemic, and probably not done or shaped up for a disaster, e.g. Hikarangi. So making sure the legislation covers off emergencies, crisis situations and disasters. You know, every day we're finding something else, and you know, science is informing us now of major threats that we didn't think of before. The CrowdStrike, you know, who would have thought technology failure like that? Space weather, we know that's predominantly, it's number 4 in the US. They put satellites up to try and measure the solar flares. At the moment, it's front and centre. It's a really major concern for us as we become more technology enabled. It also disable us in a major event occurring. The MSIP program, the one thing I think that will land, if I was a betting person, would be the COP. So the Common Operating Picture. At the moment, we do not have such a thing in New Zealand. You are so lucky under Ben's leadership and your guidance that you probably have the best COP of anywhere in the country. You are leading it. Nationally, we are woeful. If you ask me to show me a picture of an event happening across nationally, we don't have the tools and mechanisms to do that. So that piece of work is underway, and that's one that the Minister is really pitching in big time. What that'll mean is the Common Operating Picture will give us a common platform, and the concept is to take that platform from a national platform that looks the same at a regional level and a local level. The ability to access key information and data from multiple sources and be able to interrogate that. What that needs is really front-ended good investment in intelligence. The intelligence ability to make sure you can make sense of the data, sure we put the right people in the right place at the right time doing the right things. So, and that also will include the life safety tools that we have. Make sure that EMA is up to scratch, the likes of our dartboy networks, and all these things that we currently have need to be state of the nation and need to be the best they possibly can be. The other one that we're really pushing along is the Resilience Fund, and I know you've used that a number of times. The Resilience Fund was set back about 40, 50 years ago, so it's less than $1 million, and 40, 50 years ago that was a lot of money. Now it probably takes that much to administer that fund. So what we're proposing is that potentially would go up to any inflation would sit at about $30 million. So making annually $30 million available to the system, e.g. you, to make application for that money. I think that'll then help you to give that uplift So we sit around the table at the moment, what can we do to support you nationally, would be the Resilience Fund. So, and then there are other things like we've talked about getting the insurance function in place. Regional support teams, this is having permanent teams in the three major regions of Wellington, Christchurch and Auckland, that would then be able to provide training standards and such like to the regions as well. So that's another mechanism that we are going through. However, these are going to have to be prioritised by Cabinet, and we'll wait and see. But I would tend to think that the strong advocacy by the ministers around the COP is that something we will see come through. Just a couple of other things from me is the EMA testing. I know we get that will happen again on May the 25th between 6 and 7 p.m. That's our one big mechanism, and it's our ability to contact all New Zealanders and test the system with that EMA capability. So any support that you can have for people to be aware of that and take part in that. And the amount, we do get a few complaints. People think we have their numbers, their personal numbers. We do not. It's purely a network test.
What's the strike rate, John?
Strike
How many
rate.
people do you?
It's a good 90%.
Wow.
90%. It's going to get better as we use satellite. So One NZ's now promoting the use of satellite. At the moment, there are black spots in New Zealand in coverage where we are concerned we won't get to. Hence why we say, you know, long, strong, yet gone. If you're waiting for an EMA alert to come out, don't wait. You know, use a human warning system. You don't need to have a technology warning system, but that's getting better and better as we go along. We can't override some of the Apple technology that locks it out or turns it off and those sort of things. We're working internationally with Apple around that. Some major focuses internally with NEMA, just say logistics is probably one of the biggest issues. You're landing it here as a region. New Zealand as a country is not well poised for our logistical capability. In the 80s, we made some decisions as a country to go to a just-in-time culture, and you know yourself if you order something, an electronic something, or you're ordering. I went to order a part for my car. It's a Toyota RAV4. I've been told it's going to take 8 weeks to get here. So New Zealand's culture is like that, and we saw that through the pandemic, where key supplies weren't available. So we're looking to go from we're doing basically an asset audit at the moment, trying to work out food. New Zealand has enough food for 9 days in 3 major distribution hubs in New Zealand. Once that's gone, we're in trouble. And there are a lot of these where we've gone to a just-in-time culture, which is causing us some issues. So we're doing a massive audit of where those things are. We don't know in New Zealand where all of our assets are, where all of our generators are, and we're now going to be working with supply chain experts, logistical people, to work out how we move those things from A to B, up and down the country. There are a lot of companies like private companies, corporate companies that do logistics really well. Why would we depend on government to do it when we can actually use private companies to do it? They do that stuff, they make a living out of it. So we're looking at virtual tender panels. So what we'll do is arrange with organisations to hold a set amount of key supplies in their normal stores, rather than if we build a massive warehouse, you've got problems with that, you know, whereas what we can do is have a virtual type of warehouse. So it's occurring. Intelligence is another area we're investing a lot of thinking and ability into at the moment. It was sort of a part-time concept, but strategic intelligence, you're seeing that through the science come through, and planning. So there's been an uplift in planning. So we've landed 2 key things. One is the first iteration of the catastrophic plan. So the catastrophic for us is simply, that's our space really. At the end of the day, emergencies, you sit there, crisis, in and out, disasters is us. So that pandemic type of thing, that situation which is going to bring us to our knees as a country, is where NEMA is really focusing at the moment. And the other big focus we've got is on the private. How do we involve the private corporate companies and the volunteer sectors nationally in emergency management? Australia have gone down that level and have come up with a national coordination mechanism where they have 500 different entities sitting around the table where they actually leverage off the private companies and the volunteers and the NGO sectors at a national level. We don't have that real capability. The only thing we sort of have at the moment is the ODS concept and the watch group concept. I want to just praise you as a region. Your shakeout with the Wainui School was absolutely superb. 690,000 people registered last year in New Zealand for shakeout. 27% of your population did. You were by far outshine the rest of the country. So, you know, it's absolutely superb, but the rest of the country's got some way to go. So what you're doing is right on point. So thank you for that. You've also, and Ben's articulated there, the disaster-ready water purification. Again, we as nationally are looking at what you're doing, what you've done with the COP. We've looked at and said, hey, you've got this sort of well primed, and you've done a lot of work. So we're learning from you as a region as well. And then Ben's obviously, and thank you for allowing him to be part of our national controller cohort as well. So thank you for what you're doing. It's really me, Chair, but I really appreciate the ability to be here. It's great to hear what you're doing. Don't underestimate where you sit as far as a region. You are probably the gold standard. And I know you've had a lot of events and your community have been through a lot, and that's been really hard on you as leaders. But what's come out of that is your ability to be better prepared than most other places. So thank you. And yeah, nothing else here, Ian, from you?
Yeah, I've just got one thing to add. You're aware that we were looking at becoming an authorised reseller for the Starlink service. That has now been approved. We are the first government agency basically to get this service. So we're going to pilot it for 3 months, and we're looking at Waka Kotahi, Canterbury and
Otago.
And obviously if that's successful, we'll then start rolling it out across the country, starting at North Island down. And just to confirm, as John said, the Minister has extended the bill feedback to 5 p.m. on the 20th of March. So please get it in.
Yes, we definitely will. I'm meeting up with the Minister 4 p.m. on Monday, so I think he's just talking to all the mayors, the regional council mayors, and just some feedback on what we think. But as a region, we will definitely make sure we lean in.
One thing I can provide assurance of is if you have an event and you need Starlinks, we do have a supply that we can actually bring very quickly to you.
When is the One NZ satellite stuff going to work as well? Because I can understand that would not cover everyone because you have to be a member of One, which used to be Vodacom. So that will be the Starlinks and the One.
Yep.
Yeah, and we are talking to them because of an emergency, you know, they need to open their network to other providers as well. Awesome. So, you know, I think this is the whole thing about the private sector to make sure that they come to the party. They are key players. Yep. Sorry, it was the 20th then, did I say the 13th? So.
Yeah.
Awesome.
My apologies.
Thank you. Annie.
Thank you, that was really interesting. The whole lot. You too. My question is around food banks on the East Cape, and we're often, like most of us, just have to get in and do what needs to be done. There are food banks that are now empty, and it's hard times for people.
Yeah.
Cost of living and everything like that is there's not a week goes by where whānau are not reaching out for food now. At a community level, doing lots of things around how to grow your own food and get back to some of those basic things that, our core. And there was a massive effort on behalf of on part of the iwi and all of our whanaunga around the motu pulling in, but that needs to be done better as well. Has there been any thought or collaboration with MSD or any of the other agencies that are engaged in that space? Because it's definitely something, although we're hoping that people are more prepared next time, there will be a next time, which is inevitable. But sometimes, like the recent weather event, they don't have a name anymore because they're happening so frequently, so they don't even have a name, so then there's no certainty that there'll be an it'll be called an emergency or anything. Just have to get on with it. But so it's around the Kai stuff, I suppose. You've got the communications covered, you've got the water covered. But what about that side of things?
Yeah, look, very good, absolutely, Chris. Because you go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, don't you? And people that have water, food, and shelter, and now telecommunications has probably become one of those as well, so they can connect it. Nationally, what we're doing, we're talking to the big food suppliers because a lot of them have, if they don't have stores with their brand on it, they are the suppliers of those food into those places. So this is what we're saying, they have a responsibility. I know in Australia, Coles, who's a big food supplier over there, have stepped in to say they have a moral obligation to make sure that food gets to these communities, because they make money out of the communities as well. They need to also be able to do that. So it's also putting the onus of responsibility not just on the sector, but the system itself. And so we're having those conversations with them, because what are they going to do? How are they going to assist? You did right, like say for example, babies, they're our most vulnerable. Formula, baby formula, nappies, all those sort of things, and how can they prioritise that and help us with that as well?
I guess just supplementary to that is, because if the roads are broken, which is inevitable, they can't come, the suppliers don't come because the roads are closed, and they can't because of insurance and every other thing. And then we're in a more complicated situation still. So those conversations as well need to happen in terms of, well, if your trucks are not going to be able to come on our road, or they won't because we're still calling them closed, even though locals might be still travelling on them. How do we circumnavigate that so that the food still somehow gets through, or those, especially the emergency supplies, get through?
Yeah, well, that's all part of. This is why your CDEM plan becomes really important. So you do the thinking through that. You've got your response plan as well, because the idea is the CDEM plan is all about looking at your hazard. Then the next part of that is saying, well, so what? And then the next part is, if we need to get to these isolated communities, what's your response plan? And that's where you need to kick that around and actually work that out yourself. But what I'm saying to you is, putting the onus back onto other entities as well. But obviously, Ben's team will sort of sit around that, and exercising this becomes really important as well. I think the more exercising that you can do, tabletop exercises are a really good way to find gaps. We've just started to do a lot more of that. We had Rua Whenua, which was the exercise that we ran nationally, to sort of say Transalpine fault is gone. What do we do in the initial response? 2 weeks in, what are we doing? And then 2 weeks in from that, what are we doing? And sort of write your scenarios, and you can build that into that so that, at least you can test your plans, because your plans should start to address that.
Okay, thank you.
All good? Thank you. Thank you for the good work you do. To wrap it up.
Yes, I just want to make a mention that we do have a draft submission that we've prepared, but it wasn't available to be able to send it through today. So what we will do is circulate that via email and get some feedback and then so manage it that way.
So once it's sent, can the committee members, if you have anything to add, just let me know, nothing to add, or add, and then we will start it. Okay? Sure. Someone moving Ben's paper. Thank you, Councillor Wharehinga. Seconded by Councillor Pahuru. Huriwai, all in favour? Contrary, coffee time. This is the end of the meeting, but remember we have a workshop starting at 1.
Yeah. Oh.
So